The emergency dispatcher's line crackled to life at the darkest hour of the night. On the other end, a man's voice delivered a chilling confession. They murdered my neighbor, and I am about to take my own life. The dispatcher, maintaining professional composure, sought clarification. Could you please confirm what you just said? Yes, I killed my neighbor and plan to end my life, the caller reiterated, his voice steady. What's your name? The dispatcher inquired, attempting to establish rapport. Nikolai, the dispatcher, expertly navigating the volatile situation, assured Nikolai of their desire to help while urging against rash actions. When questioned about the neighbor's whereabouts, Nikolai revealed the grim details. The victim lay in their apartment, undiscovered for several hours. Are you certain about the fatality? The dispatcher probed, searching for any possibility of survival. Nikolai's response was horrifyingly specific. I crushed his skull with a hammer. He can be breathing. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Nikolai admitted to being under duress from blackmail. The dispatcher informed him that law enforcement was en route, estimated to arrive within 10 minutes, and requested information about any weapons in Nikolai's possession. Yes, I have a gun, Nikolai confirmed. I intend to shoot myself in the head. Despite the dispatcher's urgent pleas to reconsider, Nikolai remained resolute. This won't end until I am dead, he declared, referencing some malevolent force he encountered. You don't understand what I've been through or who I am dealing with. This is pure evil, and it won't stop until I fulfill the agreement. Before the dispatcher could learn more about this mysterious agreement, the line went silent. Nikolai's final words directed authorities to check the top drawer of his desk cabinet, suggesting it contained explanatory information. The aftermath. This harrowing exchange occurred in August 2014, around 3 a.m. When police responded to the call, they discovered two scenes. The body of a 27-year-old man and a dictaphone containing Nikolai's final message. Though initially withheld, this recording eventually surfaced online, causing significant public interest as it revealed the motives behind these tragic events. Nikolai's final testament. The recording, dated August 20, 2014, captured the voice of a man who had reached his breaking point. A self-described, ordinary cashier and gaming enthusiast, Nikolai began his narrative by acknowledging the chaos of recent events. The past few hours have been absolute hell, he stated, his voice heavy with resignation. And who does it happen to? A regular cashier who happens to be a gaming nerd. Sure, I enjoy video games and exploring the dark web for curiosities, but does that make me deserving of this fate? Nikolai then detailed the events leading to that fateful night. After returning from work, he followed his usual routine, having dinner before settling at his computer around midnight. The house stood silent, with only the ticking of a clock in the adjacent room breaking the stillness. He spent nearly 3 hours immersed in his favorite online game before brewing coffee and venturing into the dark web. He explained his familiarity with Tor browser, describing it as a tool for private internet access and reaching blocked websites. Nikolai emphasized that the dark web wasn't solely populated by criminals, but also by legitimate users seeking information unavailable through conventional search engines. He identified himself as belonging to this latter group, though admitted to occasional forays into questionable territory, usually emerging unscathed, until this final, fatal encounter. That night, after hours of unremarkable browsing, Nikolai stumbled upon an unusual website with an enticing promise. This application will fulfill all your desires. Intrigued by the mysterious website, Nikolai clicked through without hesitation. The site's design was remarkably austere. No pentagrams, hieroglyphs, or other occult imagery one might expect. Instead, it displayed a simple message in bright red text against a black background. Welcome, dear guest. Your presence here is no coincidence. Your desires yearn for fulfillment. Download the application and ask for anything you wish. But remember, everything has its price. Nikolai smirked skeptically at the message. After running a quick virus scan, he clicked the "Download File" button. The installation process followed standard procedures. A setup wizard appeared, and he began clicking through the unnecessary pages. He paused only at the user agreement, where a checkbox required his acceptance to proceed. Like most people, he skipped reading the terms entirely. After all, who actually reads those tedious agreements? And proceeded with the installation. This moment marked the beginning of his descent into chaos. The file proved remarkably small, downloading in the brief time it took him to prepare coffee in the kitchen. Returning with his favorite brew, he located the new desktop icon and double-clicked it. The application launched full screen, presenting a minimalist menu with just one option: Start. Something stirred within him then. His rational mind screamed warnings, urging him to delete the file immediately. But as often happens, curiosity overwhelmed caution. Steeling himself, he clicked the button, and the screen transformed. A new message appeared, simply reading, "Speak," with the number 1 displayed in the upper left corner, presumably indicating the first wish. Initially confused by the interface, Nikolai stared blankly at the monitor for several seconds before comprehending what was expected of him. I want pizza," he finally declared. "Pepperoni, please." The screen immediately displayed, "Please wait." Then nothing else happened. The house remained silent except for the steady ticking of the clock. "What a scam," Nikolai muttered aloud. "I almost believed it, like an idiot. That's enough internet for tonight. Time for bed." An unexpected doorbell ring cut through his words, making him jump in his chair. He stared toward the corridor in surprise. It was nearly 4 a.m. Who could possibly be calling at this hour? He barely knew his neighbors, mostly elderly residents who wouldn't disturb anyone's peace without good reason. Cautiously rising from his chair, Nikolai tiptoed to the entrance. Peering through the peephole, he saw only the familiar landing, nothing more. "Hey, who's there?" he called out, attempting but failing to disguise his voice. "Do you know what time it is? I could call the police, you know." Silence answered him. Whoever was there had either left or was hiding somewhere in the building, a thought that unsettled him deeply. Armed with a shoehorn, he waited several seconds before carefully opening the door, which he confirmed was secured by the chain. The landing was empty, but looking down, he discovered something peculiar. A solitary pizza box with a note reading, "Enjoy your meal, Nikolai." His amazement knew no bounds. While his mind insisted this couldn't be real, his eyes provided irrefutable evidence. No. This can't be happening, he stammered. This must be a prank. There's a hidden camera somewhere, right? He raised his voice and opened the door fully, expecting pranksters to emerge from above or below for a shared laugh. But the building remained silent, save for an old light bulb flickering ominously. Taking the pizza inside, he placed it in the kitchen and sat beside it, repeatedly reading the mysterious note. Then a rationalization occurred to him. He had ordered pizza earlier that day while at work, wanting to celebrate his payday. The delivery had been delayed, leading him to cancel the order. Surely they had decided to deliver it anyway as an apology. Relieved by this logical explanation, he happily consumed a couple slices of the free pizza before returning to his bedroom to prepare for sleep. Approaching his computer to shut it down and save electricity before unfolding his sofa bed, he froze. The black screen remained, but now displayed different text. The number 2 appeared in the upper left corner, with a central message reading, "You have one wish remaining. Speak." Mixed emotions flooded through him. Terror gripped him at witnessing what could only be described as mystical occurrence. Yet simultaneously, intense curiosity burned within him. It wasn't every day one encountered something akin to a genie's lamp, capable of granting wishes, or at least, almost all wishes. Curiosity piqued, Nikolai wondered about the parameters of this mysterious system. Can I really ask for anything? Are there limitations? His questions met only silence. The application continued displaying its blood-red text, insisting he make his wish. "All right then, what do I want?" he mused. "Maybe an apartment in the city center? Or a dacha? No, forget the dacha. I want my closet completely filled with money. 5,000 ruble notes, preferably." The familiar, "Please wait" message appeared briefly. Seconds later, an avalanche of cash erupted from the closet behind him. Euphoria overwhelmed him at the sight. The reality seemed so improbable that he resorted to pinching himself, quickly realizing this was no dream. After examining a bill to verify its authenticity, he spun toward the computer, kissing the monitor while exclaiming, "My God, what a miracle! I'll never have to work again. I can buy a premium dacha, a house outside the city. That's it. I am writing my resignation to that abusive boss right now. Let him find someone else to torment." Rising from his chair, Nikolai intended to retrieve his phone to compose an angry message. However, a notification sound from his computer stopped him short. The application wasn't finished. A new message appeared, instantly wiping the smile from his face. While he couldn't recall the exact wording, the message's essence was clear. His wishes had been granted, and now payment was due. The only acceptable currency? A human life. Either his own or another's, as specified in the user agreement. The message emphasized that debt settlement must become his absolute priority. The message left him stunned. Rather than fear, he felt shock at the developers' brazen demand for either suicide or murder, particularly their audacity to cite user agreements as justification. This reminded him, what exactly had he agreed to? Returning to Tor, Nikolai searched frantically for any information about this wish-granting application that demanded such a terrible price. Predictably, he found nothing. No one seemed to know about this miraculous yet horrifying program. Left with no alternative, he located the installation file and re-examined the agreement he previously ignored. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. The introduction was standard legal boilerplate about accepting terms by clicking accept, but what followed was genuinely disturbing. The terms, point by point, read, "Users receive exactly 2 wishes. Attempts to deceive the application were noted as universally unsuccessful. Once the terms are accepted and the application downloaded, users must make their wishes. Failing to do so wouldn't void the payment requirement, though it might nullify the wishes themselves. The application cannot resurrect, kill, or induce love. Only material wishes, cars, money, houses, were permitted. Additionally, no wish could circumvent the agreement's first point. Payment was non-negotiable and time-sensitive. Only human lives were acceptable currency, with the critical caveat that not all souls held equal value. A postscript warned of immediate consequences for payment refusal. Horrified, Nikolai hastily closed everything and shut down his computer before collapsing onto his sofa. Exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he decided to dismiss the developers' threats, planning to deal with everything after some rest. Morning, after all, brings clarity. But sleep wasn't in his future that night. Just as consciousness began slipping away, his doorbell rang again. As before, he jumped at the sound, then cautiously approached the corridor. Despite an ominous sense of danger, he still couldn't believe a random application could control human destinies. Peering through the peephole, he saw the familiar empty landing and his neighbor's closed door. Less inclined toward bravery this time, he decided to retreat to his room, pretending no one was home. This strategy proved futile. The ringing persisted, growing more insistent. Finally snapping, he rushed back to the door and shouted, "Enough already. People are trying to sleep." The ringing ceased, followed by receding footsteps that sparked his curiosity. Looking through the peephole again, hoping to glimpse the mysterious visitor, he instead beheld something nightmarish. An inhuman entity stood on the landing, staring back with what he could only describe as void-like eye sockets, reminiscent of a skeleton. Its face was horrifically mutilated, its nose replaced by a gaping hole from which worms occasionally emerged. The entity before him defied natural law. Its body was completely hairless, devoid of even the slightest trace of clothing. Just an emaciated form with unnaturally elongated arms that stretched toward the doorbell with purposeful intent. The sight of those grotesque limbs reaching through the darkness sent waves of primal terror through Nikolai's body, triggering an instinctive fight or flight response that had been honed through millions of years of human evolution. Without conscious thought, his body chose flight. He bolted to the kitchen, his feet barely touching the floor as adrenaline carried him across the apartment. His trembling hands yanked open drawer after drawer until his fingers closed around the handle of a kitchen knife. The cold metal against his palm provided little comfort, but it was better than nothing. His heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, he fled to his bedroom, slamming and locking the door behind him. The thought of calling the police flickered through his panic-addled mind, but his phone was nowhere to be found. Had he misplaced it in his earlier excitement over the money? Or had that thing somehow taken it? The questions swirled in his mind, but they seemed increasingly irrelevant as the horror of his situation continued to unfold. What could the police do against something that clearly violated the laws of nature itself? Time lost all meaning as he stood there, knife clutched in his white-knuckled grip, waiting for whatever would happen next. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one feeling like an eternity as his mind conjured increasingly terrifying scenarios of what might come through that door. The constant ringing of the doorbell had become a kind of torture, each chime sending fresh jolts of fear through his system. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The ringing ceased, and an almost oppressive silence descended upon the apartment. The sudden quiet was almost more terrifying than the noise had been. In that moment of relative calm, hope began to creep into Nikolai's thoughts. A fool's hope, he would later realize. Perhaps the entity had departed, taking with it the cursed application and all its supernatural horrors. Perhaps he could still wake up from this nightmare and return to his normal life of mundane complaints about his boss and dreams of a better future. How terribly, tragically wrong he was. Standing in the middle of his bedroom, still maintaining his death grip on the knife, Nikolai heard something that made his blood run cold. A raspy, wet-breathing sound emanating from behind him. The noise came from his closed wardrobe, and its character was so fundamentally wrong, so utterly inhuman, that it made him wish he could simply cease to exist rather than face whatever was producing it. The sound spoke of decay and corruption, of things that should remain buried in the deepest graves. What happened next would be forever burned into his memory, a moment he would revisit in countless nightmares to come. The wardrobe doors slowly swung open with a drawn-out creak that seemed to last forever. From within the darkness of his closet, something began to emerge, not quickly, but with the deliberate patience of a predator that knows its prey has nowhere to run. The entity that crawled into his bedroom defied description. Yet Nikolai's terror-stricken mind recorded every horrific detail with perfect clarity. It was impossibly tall, towering at least 3 heads above his own height, its limbs bent at angles that no human joints could achieve. Most disturbing of all was its apparent ability to move through solid matter. The walls seemed to ripple around it like water, suggesting it operated under physics entirely different from our own. The stench hit him next. A miasma of decay so powerful it nearly triggered his gag reflex. This wasn't the simple smell of death, but something far worse. The putrid odor of active decomposition, of flesh being consumed by the very earth itself. The creature reeked as though it had just clawed its way out of a fresh grave, and the visual evidence supported this impression. Worms, actual, writhing worms, infested its deteriorating flesh, occasionally emerging from the black voids of its eye sockets to explore its ruined face before retreating back into the darkness of its body. Nikolai's mind took mere seconds to process these impossible horrors before his survival instincts took control. He spun on his heel and ran, not bothering to look back. His flight took him through his apartment, out the front door, into the stairwell, and finally down to the street. He only stopped running when he spotted a car passing through his courtyard. The sight of this mundane symbol of normal life reminding him that he had reached relative safety among other human beings. Standing there in the pre-dawn darkness, gasping for breath, he found his eyes drawn inexplicably upward toward his apartment windows. What he saw there nearly stopped his heart. Behind the curtain stood that same impossibly tall silhouette, its eyeless gaze fixed upon him with an intensity he could feel even from the street below. The message was clear. He could run, but he couldn't hide. The thought of returning to his apartment that night was clearly suicidal. Understanding this fundamental truth, Nikolai settled onto a bench near his building's entrance, resigning himself to wait for dawn. Hours passed like minutes as he sat there, his mind racing through possible solutions to his situation, each seeming more impossible than the last. Even then, he struggled to imagine any kind of future for himself, a future free from monsters, mysticism, and all the supernatural horrors that had, until this night, been nothing more than stories to frighten children. His life had already begun to unravel, the familiar patterns of his existence shredding like tissue paper in a storm. The simple concerns of yesterday, his job, his boss, his dreams of a better apartment, seemed laughably trivial now that he had glimpsed the terrible reality lurking behind the thin veneer of normal life. When he finally emerged from his dark thoughts, the world had changed. Daylight had fully arrived, and with it came the first stirrings of normal life as elderly residents began their daily routines. Among them was Vera Ignatievna, his first-floor neighbor, making her usual morning journey toward the tram stop. "Good morning, Kolya," she called out with familiar warmth. "Why are you up so early? Did someone wake you?" Nikolai attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy, his voice surprisingly steady as he replied, "Morning, Ma, No, everything's fine. I just came out for some air." In that moment, terror seized him with fresh intensity. As he looked at his neighbor's face, he watched in horror as her familiar features transformed into those of the creature that had been trying to break into his apartment. The demon smiled at him with that ruined face, its eyeless gaze seeming to devour his very soul. He maintained his composure just long enough for any passing observers to miss his reaction, then leapt from the bench and rushed back into the building. Inside the relative darkness of the stairwell, somewhere between the second and third floors, he literally ran into Pyotr Vasilievich. The 70-year-old resident had been heading out for his morning grocery run, a daily routine now disrupted by their collision. The elderly man's familiar presence should have been comforting, a touch of normalcy in this nightmare, but Nikolai found himself dreading to look at his face, terrified of what he might see. "Hey, Kolya," the old man called out, his voice carrying the slight wheeze of age. "Where are you running to? Nearly knocked me over. Uncle Petya. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to." Nikolai's voice trailed off as he kept his eyes fixed firmly on the floor, afraid to raise them and see that horrific visage once again. The sound of his racing heart seemed to echo off the stairwell walls, a reminder that no matter where he ran, the horror would find him. The morning light filtering through the stairwell windows did nothing to dispel the darkness that had taken root in Nikolai's world. Each encounter with a neighbor now carried the potential for fresh terror. Each familiar face might hide that nightmare creature's visage. His simple life as a cashier who enjoyed video games and occasional dark web browsing seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a reality where demons wore the faces of his neighbors and safety was nothing but an illusion. "It's really not a big deal," I thought to myself, recalling wilder moments from my youth spent playing Counter-Strike. Those endless nights of digital warfare seemed almost innocent now, compared to the weight of the choice hanging over me. The familiar corridors of my apartment building felt different today, more oppressive, as if the very walls were aware of my internal struggle. The elderly man who approached me in the hallway sized me up carefully, his eyes carrying a wisdom that made me uncomfortable. He was wearing a worn cardigan that had seen better days, its brown fabric faded at the elbows. "You seem to be in a hurry?" he asked, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of age. No, not particularly, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. Why do you ask? Well, I could use some help, he explained, fidgeting with the buttons on his cardigan. The light bulb in my bathroom burned out. My knees aren't what they used to be. Can't climb up on anything anymore. He offered a self-deprecating smile that creased his entire face. Been washing up in the dark for 2 days now. Not ideal at my age, you understand. How could I refuse such a simple request from an old man? The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, contemplating matters of life and death, and the universe presents me with this seemingly innocent interaction. Especially since returning home held little appeal after everything that had happened. The entity waiting in my apartment had stripped away any comfort I once found there. Without hesitation, I agreed to help, and followed him, Pyotr Vasilievich, into his apartment. The door creaked open to reveal a space frozen in time, a perfect capsule of Soviet-era domestic life. Family photos lined the walls, their black and white subjects staring out from ornate frames. The air carried the faint scent of boiled cabbage and decades-old furniture polish. Bathroom, right here, he directed, gesturing toward a door with peeling paint. The bulb, above the door. Just unscrew it while I fetch a new one. I keep them in the kitchen somewhere. His slippers made soft shuffling sounds against the worn linoleum as he moved. He showed me where to go, then disappeared into another room, leaving me alone in the hallway. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant ticking of what must have been an ancient wall clock. Stepping into the bathroom, I took in my surroundings. It was a typical Soviet-era setup, nothing fancy, almost identical to my parents' place and my old apartment. The white tiles had yellowed with age, and the grout between them told stories of countless repairs. Following tradition, the floor was cluttered with various bottles of cleaning supplies, their labels faded and peeling. And there, among the domestic detritus, lay a construction hammer that immediately caught my eye. Its wooden handle was smooth from years of use, the metal head carrying the patina of countless projects. I am not sure why, but I picked up the hammer, studying it as if in a trance. The weight felt significant in my hand, like it carried the gravity of what was to come. When that horrific message came flooding back, its words burning in my mind. You can either give your own life, or take another. The choice that had seemed impossible this morning now presented itself with terrible clarity. Yes, I know what you rethinking. What kind of monster am I? The kind that stands in an old man's bathroom, contemplating murder while he trustingly searches for a light bulb? To murder an innocent person, and so treacherously from behind. I know. The weight of it sits in my chest like lead. I also know that if everything had been fair and proper, if the universe hadn't forced this horrible choice upon me, I would have made exactly the same decision. Self-preservation is a powerful force. The old man had started to say something else, his voice carrying from the kitchen, something about finding the right wattage. But before he could finish, I spun around and struck him in the head with the hammer, using all my strength. The sound was horrible. A wet thunk that I knew would haunt my dreams forever. He collapsed instantly, his body crumpling like a marionette with cut strings. Shocked by my own actions, I dropped the murder weapon, its clatter against the tile floor seemingly echoing through the entire building. Then I fled home, my mind racing about what would come next, leaving behind the scene of my unforgivable act. The same putrid stench that had been emanating from my room greeted me at my doorstep, assaulting my nostrils, a mixture of decay and something otherworldly. But fear had abandoned me, replaced by a hollow acceptance of what I'd become. So I boldly entered my bedroom, immediately spotting the unwelcome visitor's figure in the corner where I first encountered it. I did what you wanted, I declared, my voice stronger than I felt. Why are you still here? Our deal is done. The response was simple. The entity, still shrouded in shadows that seemed to defy the laws of physics, silently pointed to my shelf where my missing phone lay. I picked it up with trembling hands, frozen in place as the screen illuminated of its own accord. On the screen was that same agreement, specifically the fourth clause which read, "One soul does not equal another." The words seemed to pulse with a dark energy, mocking my assumption that any life could be traded for another so simply. As I share this story now, I am wearing my nicest clothes, a suit I bought for a cousin's wedding last year, now serving a far darker purpose. I am methodically cleaning my pistol, a birthday gift from my father. He presented it proudly, telling me it would keep me safe in these uncertain times. How ironic that it would ultimately protect me from myself. The metal gleams under my desk lamp, each swipe of the cleaning cloth bringing it closer to its final purpose. The true tragedy is that I senselessly killed a kind man when I could have avoided harming anyone else and settled for a single victim, myself. The realization sits heavily on my conscience, a weight that even my impending actions can fully lift. But enough reflection. The time for philosophical musings has passed. Time to call emergency services. Someone needs to deal with the bodies. I've written everything down, left it all in order. At least they'll understand why it happened, even if they can never understand how it felt to make that choice. The entity won my soul through my own cowardice. Perhaps this final act can begin to make amends. Well, friends, that concludes our horror portion today. But remember, the darkness is always around, and it is waiting for its time to remind you again. If you enjoyed tickling your nerves and dive into the world of mystery and mysticism, do not forget to put a like, comment and, of course, subscribe to the channel. After all, ahead of you awaits more chilling stories that make your blood run cold in your veins. Click on the bell to not miss new videos, and remember, sometimes the worst is what is hidden in silence. See you in the next installment. Unless, of course, you're afraid.